Good afternoon, friends. Another important video on important clarification by way of circular number 232, dated 10th of September 2024. When data hosting services is being provided to cloud computing service recipient outside India, whether it is export of services, can be considered as a place of supply, is a location of recipient outside India. In factual position, they're the data hosting service provider in India, having set up in India, and they are providing these data hosting services to cloud computing service recipient outside India. And this cloud computing service recipient is having customer base across the world. So customers are approaching to the cloud computing based service provider who is outside India, and they are catering services to consumer base across the world. And this cloud-based computing company is taking services of data hosting, and this data hosting is being provided by Indian service provider. So in the hands of data hosting service provider in India, whether they are intermediary, first question, because data hosting giving to the cloud computing in turn giving to the customer base across the world. Whether we can say data hosting service provider is an intermediary. If intermediary, then place of supply is a location of supplier, GST liable, and it is not export of services. If it is not intermediary, then of course, default provision section 13 subsection 2 of IGST Act, place of supply would be location of recipient, export of services, provided all other conditions under section 2 subsection 6 of IGST Act is being met. First. Second, can we say that it is performance-based service, goods made available by the recipient to the supplier, and thereby performance-based in India, GST liable? Second point. Third point, can we say that because setup is in India for data hosting service provider, it is location of immovable property, and hence it is not export of services? These are the three components in this circular number 232, which is being clarified. I'm sharing the screen and discussing the important para of this particular circular. So this is the circular which I'm referring to. So what would be the place of supply of data hosting services provided by a service provider located in India to a cloud computing service provider located outside India? As I've explained that there are three disputes whether data hosting service provider can be considered as an intermediary, whether the data hosting services are provided in relation to goods made available by recipient performance-based, and third, can be considered because setup of data hosting service provider is in India and place of supply can be location of immovable property as per section 13 subsection 4 of IGST Act. So this is what three broad issues. Now how they are clarifying. For intermediary, what they're discussing, that data hosting service provider provide data hosting services to the cloud computing service provider on a web platform through computing and networking equipment for the purposes of collecting, storing, processing, distributing, or allowing access to large amount of data. The cloud computing service provider provides cloud-based application and software services to various end users, customers, and subscribers for data storage, analytics, artificial intelligence, machine learning, processing, database analysis, and deployment services, etc. So it is inclusive. The end user, customer, and subscriber access cloud computing services seamlessly over the internet through technology hosted on data center. There appears to be no contract between data hosting service provider in India and the end user, consumer, and subscriber of the overseas cloud computing service provider. Thus, they're saying services to the cloud computing service provider on principal-to-principal basis on its own account. It is not acting as a broker or agent for facilitating supply of services between cloud computing service provider and their end user and consumer. Thereby, they are not intermediary. In terms of performance-based, Section 13, subsection 3, clause A, whether any goods is involved, that is what the big issue, because recipient is making goods available as per Section 13, subsection 3, clause A to the supplier for the performance of the services. Is there any goods involved? They're saying there is as such no goods involved. It is all happening through e-platform. And for that, certain hardware and software are being used, which is of supplier only. So there's no goods available. So they are outrightly saying it is not falling at that performance-based services. But while discussing this, the important para 3.2.4, it may happen in some cases that some of the hardware required for data hosting services is provided by the recipient of service. Can we say now it is performance-based? Then this circular is clarifying very clearly that some hardware provided does not mean that goods is made available, because overall comprehensive service is being provided data hosting service provider. And he's using his own setup, hardware and software, and providing services on his own account, principal-to-principal basis. So it is not going to cover under Section 13, subsection 3, clause A, performance-based. Now, next question, whether it is related to location of immovable property. Of course, setup is in India. It is being provided through hardware and software by data hosting service provider. Can it be said location of immovable property? No way. That is what it is being discussed, that data hosting service provider either use owned or leased premises for keeping IT infrastructure or other hardware required for providing data hosting services. They also procure hardware, uninterrupted power supplies, backup generator, ventilation and cooling equipment, network connectivity, fire suppression system, security, human resources, etc. Handle operation like server monitoring, IT management, equipment maintenance, including repair and replacement of the same. What is the principal supply here? Are we really leasing out immovable property? No, we are providing data hosting services to the client, and thereby it is not falling into that location of immovable property, and GST is not going to be levied from that perspective. Since neither of the provision starting from Section 13, subsection 3 till subsection 13 of Section 13 of IGST Act is applicable, only default provision Section 13, subsection 2 is more aptly applicable, and place of supply would be location of recipient. If that is the case, then of course it can be considered export of services provided all other conditions under Section 2, subsection 6 of IGST Act are met. So export of services would be considered. This is what being concluded in this particular circular, laudable one, and clarifying a lot. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned. Thank you very much.